Hello everybody, today's April 23rd, 2025. Been a while since I've posted an update, 3 weeks to be exact, but I've just been focusing on my recovery, and as you know, it's a full-time job physically and mentally. But I thought I'd jump on today and just post an update of how things have been going the last 3 weeks. I'm kind of going to be going back in time when I talk about a lot of side effects because I'm not experiencing some of those side effects anymore. Thank goodness. But I will say, just right off the bat, this is a very, very, very slow process. I believe, we become parents and have kids to learn how to be patient amongst many other things. But I also feel like this journey with cancer has really been teaching me to be patient and really to be patient with myself. I think we have a lot of expectations of how we're going to recover and how we're going to, we're just going to bounce back from things, it's based on maybe how we feel one day. But then you wake up the next morning and all of a sudden you feel like you've went back a week or two as far as how you feel. So this definitely isn't a linear type of healing where it's just, you feel a certain way one day and you're like, okay, now that's the new, bar that you set for yourself for recovery. And then the next day it just keeps going up. It's not like a cold or the flu where you just feel better, every day and then finally you're just recovered. I found that this is, like I said, just, some days, some weeks you're feeling like, okay, I'm feeling good. And then all of a sudden, you'll feel like, you kind of went backwards. First, I just want to start off, with some updates of side effects that I've experienced in the last 3 weeks. And again, just remember that a lot of these side effects that I'm talking about are gone at this point, being 6 weeks post-treatment. One of the side effects I was experiencing a couple weeks ago was just, your throat gets really dry at night. I do have a humidifier. I do take this Biotin spray where it just kind of kept your mouth and your throat moisturized. And, in the mornings I would just wake up and it just was just so dry. And just those first few swallows were just horrible in the morning. It just felt like razor blades and glass just trying to get down your throat. Now you have the phase where your body's just creating so much saliva and so much mucus, and then it gets to the point to where it kind of dries up. I don't feel like I got to the point to where my saliva really dried up. It was just mainly at night because I just wasn't getting enough moisture throughout the night. My throat was just, really just itchy and scratchy just because it was healing. It's kind of like when a sore on your elbow or something, like maybe you fall down and scrape it, and it, when it starts to heal and scab over, it just gets a little bit itchy. So, you got to remember the radiation, it was frying the inside. Lack of a better word, it looked like, raw hamburger in there. And so as that's healing and starting to develop new cells and new tissue, it just gets itchy. So that's just the nature of the healing process. Another thing while we're on that topic, nerve damage. There was again, just everything's being fried, from left to right. And so, there was some nerves that had been damaged. And, in the past week and a half, 2 weeks, those nerves are starting to wake up. And when nerves start to wake up, it means you feel a lot more pain. So it's kind of a double-edged sword where you're like, oh, I wish I didn't feel the pain. But then it's just like, well, the healing process is in full effect because these nerves are starting to wake up and come back online, and new nerves are starting to grow. So that's a good thing. And all this means that we're on the right track. A couple weeks ago, I just didn't have no appetite. I wasn't nauseous. I just wasn't really hungry. I think a lot of it just had to do with, the mental side of things, to where it's just I knew that when I swallowed my boosts, which I, was living off for, over a month, 3 high-calorie boosts, they're 540 calories. I mentioned that in my last video. But, I think a lot of it had to do with the mental, just, because it was just so uncomfortable and painful to swallow that my body just kind of shut off and just said, you're not hungry. Where really I was hungry, and watching these food videos, and it's like, oh my gosh, I wish I could eat that right now. Sleeping at night, it's kind of a hit and miss. Overall, it's hasn't been the best even up to today. Some new things have developed just with the nerves coming back online, and especially on my left side, it's just a lot of pain, kind of just along this area and in my ear, like I have like an ear infection or an earache, and then just coughing. I don't know why, but at night I just coughing just uncontrollably. It's not to the point of gagging, but it's just to the point of where it just really starts affecting the throat. And it's like every 20, 30 minutes, but it's not every night. Last night I had a great night, but the other night it was like every 20 minutes. The other night, right before I went to sleep, I was, talking to my wife. I'm like, in this moment, I don't have any throat pain. There's no pain in the left side of my face. Like, I feel so good right now. But then I said, I don't want to go to sleep because I'm worried, like, when I wake up, how I'm going to feel. So, and then that night's when I just had that coughing fit. So, you just got to be really prepared. Again, that's just where the patience and just, you got to have expectations, but you got to have expectations that can kind of just go with the flow. Just don't be so adamant about them and think anything's wrong when things don't go as you planned, because with this type of cancer and any kind of recovery, you just never know what to expect. And again, recovery is like this, and I think it's slowly going up like this, but it isn't. It isn't like that at all. A couple weeks ago, I was just really fatigued, just not a lot of energy, just because I just wasn't getting in enough calories. With the 3 boosts a day, you're just a little over 1,500 calories, and my body was probably at least demanding 2,500 to 3,000 calories. Because of that, recovery was just super, super slow. I was getting frustrated because, 4 weeks post-treatment, why didn't I feel like I was making any significant improvements in my health? But then what can you expect? I wasn't really giving my body a lot of nutrition. I wasn't giving it a surplus of calories and nutrients in order for it to really do its job. So it was just slowly chugging along. There was a point where I was just, for whatever reason, sniffing peppermint essential oils throughout the day, which is something that's kind of helped, settle my mind, settle my stomach, especially when I was drinking the boost. Like, it would take me 2 to 3 hours to drink one 8-ounce boost. Again, I think because of the mental, and it's just very thick, and it kind of just felt like, that thickness mixed with my saliva that was already thick. It was just like, that was a lot to swallow. Literally. I had this routine where I'd sniff some peppermint essential oil, take a chug of my boost, and then follow it up with some water. And then I'd take a break for 20, 30 minutes in between, sometimes longer, because it was also just hurting and burning my throat. I know something in the boost was just hitting those open sores, and it just didn't feel good either. So there was a lot going on. Saliva production, like I mentioned, that's subsided. The mucus as well. I'm not spitting every 20, 30 minutes at night. The skin on my neck, I know you can't tell from here, maybe you can see a little blotchiness. Basically, my neck never really got super red and sores and blisters on the outside. It kind of just like a sunburn. If you got your neck fried at the beach, and then a week or so later, you're thinking, oh man, I got tan, and all of a sudden that starts to peel. That's kind of what it looks like. The rash that I had, maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, I guess it was just a one-off type of thing, because I haven't had any reoccurrences of any type of rash. Bowel movements are still not very regular. I'm not really constipated. It's just probably every 3 or 4 days you have a bowel movement. But again, I'm not putting a lot in to be able to come out. Not too concerned about it at this point. So hydration, again, this is what I drink. I'm actually up to almost 2 of these a day, and this is 40 ounces. So I've actually been in the middle of the night having to go to the bathroom, which is great. I am super glad that I can finally get in enough liquids every day. So staying on top of hydration is just a really important part of the healing process. An interesting thing, I started, I just had a craving for a ginger ale, and then there's these kind of these healthy prebiotic drinks called Poppy. Oh, they're so delicious, and but they're, they got carbonation in them. I'm just like, that's going to burn my throat. I had read a lot of people, talking about how it was really soothing and it would break down mucus, and you just take little sips. And so my wife got me some sugar-free ginger ale, and I'm like, okay, I'm a little afraid to drink it and how it's going to make my throat. And there was a little bit of a burn, but it was this kind of satisfying kind of feeling. And same with the poppies. Drank it, and just a little bit of a burn, but it would go down, really easily, and it did break down the mucus. I wasn't guzzling it. I couldn't even do that with water, but just little sips here and there was just kind of a nice, refreshing way to get a little bit more hydration in. Probably about 2 weeks ago, man, I was having a rough one, and I just got super, super angry. I've been frustrated, but I think it's a little bit different than being angry. I was mad. I was just mad at how slow, this process was going. I'm 4 weeks, almost a little bit over 4 weeks into recovery, and I just feel the same, and in some ways worse. What is going on? I felt like there was no light at the end of the tunnel. I was never, ever going to feel normal again, and laying in bed, and I'm just I hate being in bed. I'm looking outside. I want to be outside, but I didn't have enough energy. And even if I did, I'm not eating enough calories to get out of there. And I'm just thinking about just everything, just one of those days of just, I guess just feeling sorry for myself, and had my phone in my hand. I actually threw it on the bed, but it bounced off the bed and flew all the way over to this bookshelf in our bedroom, and with pictures, and smashed the picture. And my wife comes in. She's like, what happened? I'm like, I threw my phone. I didn't tell her it bounced off the bed because I didn't mean it to fly into the bookcase, but I didn't even care to explain. I just said I threw my phone. And then it just got worse, and I just got angry, and I just started I would get to go to the bathroom. I would slamming things and hitting doors and slamming cupboards and slamming my door. And my wife's like, honey, you need to stop. And this is something I feel really ashamed of, but I yelled at her, and I was just like, you don't even know how I feel. And I slammed the door, and I'm just like, oh, just feeling so horrible, just feeling so sorry for myself and my situation. But probably 20, 30 minutes later, I came to my senses. I apologized to her. I asked her for forgiveness, that she wouldn't hold this against me when I'm at my lowest, physically and emotionally. And of course, she forgave me and she understood. But man, I don't know what happened that day, but in some ways it was almost a turning point for me, because I was like, oh my gosh, that's an ugly side of me that I do not ever want to see again. I made a commitment to myself that I was going to, handle this with a lot more grace. I think there's a difference between enduring something and enduring it well. And a goal of mine through this process has always been, okay, I know I can endure this, but can I endure it well? Meaning, can I endure it with patience and understanding and not being angry and not letting my emotions get the best of me? And that was a moment of weakness. I'm not harping on it. I know we're human, but at the end of the day, I think it's just a much healthier approach for me to be able to not only endure this, but just endure it well. I did make some notes of, just things that, that I would do differently if I was to start treatments again. I think the number one thing is that, I would have gained some weight. I've in total probably lost about 45 pounds, so from 195 to 155. Pretty obvious, I think, by just my appearance. If you look at me now, as opposed to my first videos, because when you lose 10 to 15% of your weight, the original weight that you start with before treatments, that's when they start really encouraging you to get a feeding tube. My situation is a little bit different because after I was diagnosed, I didn't jump right into surgery and radiation and chemo. I just said, I'm going to just focus on my nutrition. So for 5 months, I did the raw diet and juicing and felt better than ever. And then, did the CT scan, and the cancer had spread and the tumor had grown. And so I wasn't really packing on the weight then. And then I didn't really have a big window once I took that CT scan and made the decision to, go through treatments to gain weight, maybe only, less than a month. In a perfect world, find out you have cancer, they schedule you your treatments. I would have just started pounding in the food to gain weight. Another thing, I probably would have had a port put in, and that's where they just kind of put this plug in you. I don't know if it's in your chest area or in your arm, but it's basically just, instead of them having to do an IV every time and poke you, and which became a very traumatic experience for me towards the end, they just put it in, and it can be in you for months and maybe even over a year. But it's just, not only for the chemo infusions, but just for all the blood work. It just would save a lot of pain and frustration of them poking me all the time and trying to find my veins and all that kind of stuff. I also would have started icing my neck probably sooner, because I didn't start doing that until about 3 weeks into radiation and chemo. And again, I think that is probably one of the biggest things that helped my neck to not get super red and sores and stuff and blisters on the outside was icing my neck. That wasn't something that anyone ever told me that they did through their irradiation. It was just something that I was just like, kind of seemed like common sense, because if you were to burn your hand or something like that, you'd put an ice pack on it. And so I'm just like, okay, well, I'm getting burned, fried from the inside, so might as well just put an ice pack around my neck. And I was doing it 3 times a day. And I probably would have started doing that from day one. I kind of touched on this too. I just think that as far as the expectations, because doctors will tell you different case scenarios with different patients, how slow or how fast they recovered. So then you just kind of like fill in the blanks with, where you think you are as far as your overall health and age, and how you've recovered in the past from injuries or other sicknesses. And you kind of just form this idea in your head of like, okay, so that means once I'm done with radiation and chemo in 2 weeks, I'm going to feel like normal again. And then it doesn't happen, and you're just like, and then 3 weeks and you're not, and 4 weeks and you're not, and you're just like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to get better. So I just think, again, just not have unrealistic expectations, and just be very patient with yourself in the process, because you are healing despite how you feel. The body has a lot of work to do and a lot of things to catch up on, so you just have to let it do its thing. This is one of those things where I've asked myself, it's like, Okay, ignorance is bliss. And what I mean by that, it's like if I would have known everything that I know now, as far as intensity of the treatments, all the side effects, how it's made me feel physically and mentally, like would I do treatments again? And I'm not sure if I have a very firm answer for that. I definitely do know that if for whatever reason, these treatments didn't get all of my cancer and they said, let's do another round of radiation and chemo, I wouldn't do it. I'd find alternative ways, more holistic ways, immunotherapy. I would just look at other options out there. I don't think I could mentally and physically handle going through radiation and chemo again. I do want to just say how grateful I am for so many of my neighbors, people from my church that text me, that visit me, that drop me off little packages of food and things because, maybe they have been through cancer or knew someone who did and that's what worked for them, and little notes and cards and text messages. And it's just so sweet and so kind. It really, really makes a difference and just makes you really feel a sense of, how much people care about you. Again, one of the things that I've been gaining through this process is just learning to have empathy for people that have to go through hard health challenges. Like I really, really feel for them. So, to my neighbors and friends that have just really made me feel loved and supported, and your faith and your prayers just have meant so much. Many of you who I'll probably never meet who leave comments and messages, I didn't expect for my videos to really get out there. I was really honestly doing it for myself, a way to just have some therapy and just get out all of my thoughts and just to document this journey and look back on it to remind me, because I never want to forget this experience. And 2, 3, 10 years from now, when I'm feeling amazing and I'm just eating food and swallowing and not even thinking about it and just living life, I want to be able to always remember this experience so I can appreciate all the small things that we take for granted on a daily basis. All of you out there, wherever you are in the world, for your comments and your personal stories and struggles and how you have overcome cancer have just been so powerful and have strengthened me in so many ways. So thank you so much for your kindness. To some guy, some stranger that you came across probably by accident on the internet. But I just want you all to know how grateful I am and how it has truly lifted me through some pretty hard and dark days, just to know that I'm not alone in this. I can never end a video without thanking my amazing wife. She never ceases to amaze me. She's always making, new foods or bringing something home that she thinks would be good for me to eat and try. And sometimes I'll have like this urge to try something, and she'll make it, and I'll just be like, oh, it's burning my throat. But she's the epitome of unselfish and unconditional love, and she does feel helpless what to do on a day-to-day basis. I've told her several times there's just no way I would have been able to get through this without her. I would have given up a long, long time ago. Seriously. This month is our 22-year anniversary, and I said, I'm going to make it up to you in the next 22 years for everything that you've been doing for me in the last several months. I just really love my wife. And now, for the biggest news of all, I saved it for the end. About 2 weeks ago, my wife was out of town, and it was on a Sunday. And I'm just sitting there again. This was, one of those low points, these low days where I'm just like, I'm never going to recover. I'm drinking 3 boosts a day, one of these a day, barely. I need to do something different. And then I just had this thought in my mind. It's just like, you need to start eating solids. You need to start eating solids. And I'm just like, it's impossible. I can't eat solids. But then I'm just, at that point, 2 weeks ago, my throat, I could tell was starting to heal, but it was still sore to, get liquids down. But I'm like, I just need to force myself. I just need to eat. So I get onto Uber Eats. And what do I go for? I don't go for like mashed potatoes or like pasta or like a soup. I ordered me a ribeye steak with mushrooms and mashed potatoes. Why not? Just go for it. And so then the food arrives, and I could smell it. It smelled so delicious. And I'm like, I'm not going to taste this thing, but I can smell it, and it looked delicious. So I cut it in some really thin slices, and I think it was like a 12-ounce ribeye, and put it in my mouth, and instantly I could taste it. And man, whew, it was good. And I just chewed it up and I swallowed it. I'm like, that's not too bad. And I ate half of that steak. I ate some of the mushrooms. The mushrooms were just, for whatever reason, something in it. I don't know, maybe too salty, but that burned my throat a little bit. But just to be able to eat that steak was like a turning point for me, like mentally. Going from just drinking these boosts to eating a ribeye steak. That's like something you save for like, level 10, should have been like applesauce. So it was very, very encouraging. And my wife comes home that night and I tell her and she's just like, oh my gosh, she's just so excited. And so the next day she's like, okay, well, what do you want me to make you? Let's try some scrambled eggs with some cheese and, maybe do we have some green onions? And so she makes them and I'm just, as soon as I put it in my mouth, I could taste it. This is how I was actually. I just started to cry because I was so overcome with just gratitude. Actually said out loud, I'm like, what a blessing it is to eat food. And I look over at my wife and she's crying because I'm just like putting it down, right? And I'm like, this is so good. Thanks, babe. This is so good. And, because she's been so worried about me just losing weight and just not a lot of progress in my health. And, she feels helpless. And, when she did offer to make me any kind of food, I had to say no. Or if she did try to make something, I just, one little bite, I'm like, no, it doesn't work. So for her to just see me eat, not only eating, but like enjoying it and tasting it, it was just a moment. And like I said, it was a turning point. So for the last, 2 weeks, I've been eating solids, every day. I mean, things that I just wouldn't even imagine I'd be eating, even little granola bars and chicken and pasta and bread and muffins. And today my mom brought over some Polynesian dishes. She brought me over this taro with, coconut and onions, and then this other dish, this noodle dish with corned beef and some vegetables called chop suey. And to taste it, just to be able to get it into my body, I think this is now when I'm really going to be able to heal a lot quicker. So I'm pretty much eating anything that, I want to eat and tasting everything that I'm putting in my mouth. I wouldn't say I'm tasting it at 100%, but I would say probably about 65, 70%, which is huge. A lot of people, 2-4 years, post-treatment, they still can't taste, or they can only taste sweet things, or they can only taste salty things. But I'm tasting everything that I'm eating. So I can only attribute that to the prayers and just what a blessing it is to be at this point to where I finally feel that I've turned a corner. Just mentally, that has been a game changer for me in my healing process. Just knowing now that I can get to the point to where I can start eating more calories than I'm burning and start gaining some weight back. Oh, how can I forget? I went to the doctor today. It's been a month since I've seen my radiology oncologist. So she wanted to, stick the scope up my nose and the back of my throat to kind of just get a visual of, what's going on in my throat. I'm watching on this, on this TV screen. And then when she goes over to where the tumor was, nothing. It's just, man, I'm having an emotional one today. But the tumors are completely gone. So the radiation definitely did its job of frying that thing up. There's still a little bit of inflammation going on, and even though I can swallow with minimal pain, there's always just some that doesn't go down, even water. But it's because of the epiglottis. It's like this little flap that kind of, when you go to swallow, it just opens up. So there's a little inflammation on there. Nothing to be too concerned about, but that's the reason why, which I'm glad that I know the reason now, and it's not due to the tumor still being there or something like that. The real indicator of how well the treatments are is going in for a PET scan. And so I'll be doing that in about 2 months from now. And that's where they'll be able to really tell you if you have any cancer activity anywhere going on in your body. But to be able to have this visual check today was just, such a boost in positive and mental energy. But overall, it's 6 weeks post-treatment. I can finally say with confidence that I'm well on the way to recovery. I've been out in the yard a couple times this week for a couple hours, doing yard work and fixing sprinklers and blowing leaves and debris around. And so there was a point where I didn't think that I'd be able to do those things. But here I am, slowly but surely, turning the corner and feeling better and feeling more energetic and regaining my appetite and tasting food. And so if there's any message that I want to give to any of you today, that there is light at the end of this tunnel. There are days where you're going to feel like it's never going to end, that the suffering's never going to end, that you're never going to sleep at night, that you're never going to enjoy food again. But you will. It's going to take some time, but you have to fight through it. When your body's telling you no, your mind has to tell you yes. You have to just keep on fighting. So don't give up. Don't give up on yourself. Don't give up on the people that are praying for you and cheering you on. There is strength in numbers, and together we will all beat this. We'll see you next time. Peace.